Thank you. Thank you to SAGES for allowing us to present our work, and to the moderators in the panel for hosting this session. I'm Joshua Weis. I am the Bariatric Surgery Fellow at the University of Houston, and my program director is Eric Wilson, who is the senior author on our abstract. So for our disclosures, my program director, Dr. Wilson, is a consultant and proctor for Intuitive. And beyond that, he's just a really pro-robot guy. And definitely being his fellow for 7.5 months, I have to listen to him drone on about how great the robot is. So we come at this from a bit of a pro-robot bias for sure. So take that into account when listening to our findings. So decided to tell the background of robotic bariatric surgery as a story of Dr. Wilson himself. So here's Dr. Wilson. He's doing some robotic bariatrics. He started doing robotic bariatrics in the early 2000s, right after the robotic platforms came out. He was doing bypasses on the Da Vinci standard. And he always tells his stories about all these robotic naysayers who were always looking down on him, saying, is this really necessary? Is there any level 1 evidence for this? You know, or there's these people making fun of him behind his back, saying, geez, by the time he docks this robot, I could have been done with my sleeve. Or these people just generally rolling their eyes saying, this is really expensive technology, probably has no benefit. Does this really have a place in bariatric surgery? And so Dr. Wilson gets upset and he writes this opinion piece in General Surgery News. And he says things like, robots are here to stay. There are only going to be more of them. Get used to it. It's happening. And we as surgeons have to decide whether we are going to jump on the train or be run over by it. And interestingly, this was written all the way back in 2015, 7 years ago. And we're still having these sorts of arguments today between, kind of pro and anti-robot people. Is it safe? Is it effective? Is it cost effective? There's abstracts about it at the SAGES meeting. And we're sort of still having the same arguments. So if you look at Intuitive's data, despite some of the concerns about the robot, definitely the volumes are growing within general surgery. Starting in 2011, it really takes off, and now we're ahead of gynecology and urology in robotic procedures. But there's many more general surgeons than urologists and gynecologists. And so what percentage does this really account for? And is this actually growing in bariatrics, or all these procedures just gallbladders and hernias and things like that? So we embarked on this study to characterize how robotic surgery is sort of diffusing through bariatric surgery, and specifically bariatric fellowships. So this was a retrospective review of Fellowship Council fellowships, only bariatric accredited fellowships in the US and Canada. And it was for the academic years of the decade before the COVID pandemic, when there may have been some disruptions of volumes due to COVID. So we excluded fellowship programs that were not bariatric accredited. So surely there are some MIS programs out there and advanced GI programs that do a fair amount of bariatrics, but we chose to only look at the bariatric ones since we're looking at bariatric surgery specifically. And then looking at the case logs, there were some outlier fellows that just really hadn't logged a lot of cases. Either they were off cycle, or maybe they took leaves of absences or something. So if you had less than 100 procedures total logged, not bariatric procedures, just total procedures, we excluded them from analysis. So for our outcomes, we wanted to see how the average number of robotic cases per fellows changed over these 10 academic years. We wanted to look at percentile benchmarks of robotic case volumes across fellows. So is it just some really high volume fellowships doing a bunch of robotics, or is there sort of a equal distribution across all fellowships? And then what sorts of bariatric cases are being done robotically? Sleeves, bypasses, revisions, and so on. So we had 822 fellows in our database. They did about 300,000 cases over those 10 years. And if you do the math on that, that's about 363 cases per fellow. And these are only the bariatric fellows, but they do include non-bariatric cases. So the mean volume of robotic cases done by the bariatric fellows increased from 4.4 to 50.7 from the 2010 academic year to the 2019 academic year. So it's a 10-fold increase in robotic cases. But you say, well, the fellows are doing about 363 cases. Even in your last year, a 10-fold growth is only 50 out of 360. It's really not a huge share of them. And if you drill down a little farther, you say, well, what share of the bariatric cases that the fellows are doing are actually done robotically? Are they just picking up some robotic hernias on the side, or are they actually doing robotic bariatrics? And you can see in the early years, really, robotic bariatrics struggles to get above sort of 5%. There's 2 to 6% of bariatric cases are actually done with the robot. In 2016, something appears to sort of happen, and you see some growth up to a market share closer to 14%. And so this is all procedures. When you break it down procedure by procedure, you see, mouse issues. This one? Just this? Oh, this one, thank you. So for bypasses, it's very similar trends. It lags a little bit behind the overall market share for all procedures. For sleeves, it's a very close parallel to our overall market share. It's a little higher in the beginning, but it sort of equals out as you go over time. And then interestingly, for revisions, major revisions, including a new anastomosis, so these would be like a sleeve to a bypass, they seem to be favored a little more by robotics throughout the years, so suggesting maybe people pick their more complex revisional cases for the robotic cases and just do their primary ones laparoscopically as they're used to. If you kind of model this with a trend line and you go out over time, you know, we're in the 2022 academic year now, our trends would predict probably about 21% of cases bariatric fellows are doing this year are done robotically, which is about still only 1 in 5 procedures. So this is sort of interesting if you look at how disruptive technology moves through a population, though. So you can put any technology out there and you can get people like Eric Wilson to try it and use it, but if it's not very good, it won't be taken up by other segments of adopters. And if you look at marketing literature, once you get to about 16% market share, you get into that early majority segment, and once they start using the technology, it really starts to spread pretty rapidly, and you get this exponential increase of market share. So we think it looks like robotics is pretty close to that point in bariatrics, and we might be seeing a rapid rise soon. And our data sort of supports that when you look at percentiles. So leading up to 2016, when we started to see that growth, the 95th percentile fellows, the high volume fellows, were doing lots of bariatrics, and that blue line's increasing quickly. So Eric Wilson's fellows are doing lots of robotic cases, but everybody else is just sort of dabbling in robotics up to that point. They're doing, 10 cases or less per year. But after that, you start to see growth, and you start to see robotics diffuse down to other fellowships. So the 75th percentile grows from 10 to 50 cases, and the median starts to grow starting in 2018. And you see that trend line of 95th percentile continues to increase. So the people who use robotics are using it more, and we suspect other segments will start to do the same. So there are limitations. We're only looking at bariatric fellows and bariatric fellowships. This is a small segment of the global population doing bariatrics. So it's unclear if the trends we see here apply nationwide and worldwide. But in conclusion, robotics is growing in bariatrics. If you believe in this as a disruptive technology, which I think we do, we expect to see it continue to increase and continue to take up market share. And so if you are thinking of doing a fellowship, I would look for programs that offer some robotics. And if you're already in practice, I think it's a good idea to get familiar with it and see how it fits in your practice, as it will continue to be important in our field. Thank you.